The Poison Prince, Damien Cross, built an empire on silence, every secret buried, every enemy crushed, every weakness eliminated. But when his ex-wife's name flashes across his phone at 3 a.m., begging him to save the child he never knew existed, that silence becomes a weapon aimed at his own heart. One ignored call. One dying boy. One truth that will drag Chicago's most feared crime boss into a war where the enemy wears a trusted face and children are currency. The clock is ticking, and Damien Cross is about to learn that some debts can only be paid in blood. If you want to see how far this story travels, hit the like button and comment with your city below. Now, let's begin. The rain hammered Chicago like a punishment, turning Michigan Avenue into a river of brake lights and blurred neon. Inside the obsidian tower that bore no name but everyone knew as Cross territory, Damien Cross stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, watching the city bend beneath the storm. He didn't move when his phone buzzed the first time. Didn't flinch when it buzzed again. The third time he glanced down. Elena Lane. The name hit him like a fist to the sternum. He stared at the screen until it went dark, then turned back to the window. Behind him, his Lieutenant Marcus Webb shifted weight from one foot to the other, a rare sign of discomfort in a man who'd seen bodies dropped into the Chicago River without blinking. "You want me to—" Marcus started. "No," Damien said. His voice was granite. "Let it go to voicemail." Marcus nodded and retreated to the corner of the room, his hand resting on the tablet that contained the evening's real business. Shipping manifests, payroll for 36 enforcers, and a delicate negotiation with the Southside Syndicate that required Damien's absolute focus. But focus was a luxury rapidly slipping through his fingers. The phone buzzed a fourth time. Damien's jaw tightened. Elena Lane. He'd buried that name 6 years ago, the same night he'd walked out of her apartment and made the hardest choice of his life, cutting her loose before his world could devour her. She'd been a public defender then, fierce and brilliant, with eyes that saw through his carefully constructed walls. She'd also been desperately, dangerously naive about the kind of man she'd fallen for. Loving her had been easy. Letting her go had required every ounce of discipline he possessed. The phone went silent. A moment later, a voicemail notification appeared. Damien stared at it for 10 seconds. 20. Then he pocketed the device and turned to Marcus. "The syndicate meeting. Are we set for midnight?" "Location secured, security doubled," Marcus confirmed. "They're bringing 4 men. We'll have 8. "Make it 12, Damien said. "I don't trust Angelo's sudden cooperation." Marcus made a note on his tablet. "Done. Anything else?" Damien almost said no. Almost. Instead, he found himself pulling out his phone again, thumb hovering over the voicemail. Marcus watched him with the careful neutrality of a man who knew when to stay silent. The message played. Elena's voice cracked through the speaker, ragged and raw. "Damien, I know I don't have the right to call. I know what we agreed, but if you ever—" A shuddering breath. "If you ever cared about me, please pick up. Please. It's—" Another break, this one wet with tears. "It's about your son." The world tilted. Damien's hand went white-knuckled around the phone. What did she just say? Marcus took a careful step forward. "Boss?" She said. Damien replayed the message, volume up. Elena's voice filled the room again, each word a detonation. "It's about your son. He's sick, Damien. The doctors don't know what's wrong, and he's getting worse, and I don't know what to do. I kept him secret. I kept him safe, but I can't do this alone anymore. Please call me back, please." The message ended. Damien stood frozen, his mind racing through calculations and timelines. 6 years since he'd walked away. 6 years since he'd made sure Elena Lane would never be touched by the violence that followed him like a shadow. 6 years. And she'd been raising his child in silence. "A son," he said quietly. The words felt foreign in his mouth. Marcus cleared his throat. "You didn't know." "I didn't know." Damien's voice was hollow. He'd made enemies of half the city's underworld. He'd buried secrets that could bring down empires. He'd built an organization so efficient that people whispered his name like a curse. And through it all, somewhere in Chicago, a child had been growing up without him. His child. His phone buzzed again. A text this time, also from Elena. Just an address. Mercy General Hospital, Pediatric ICU, room 347. Cancel the syndicate meeting, Damien said. Marcus's eyes widened. Boss, we've been working this deal for 3 months. If we don't show, reschedule it. Damien's tone allowed no argument. Tell Angelo something came up, something personal. He'll think it's a power play. Let him think whatever he wants. Damien was already moving toward the private elevator, Marcus scrambling to keep up. I need a car downstairs in 2 minutes. Full security detail. Where are we going? Mercy General. Marcus hesitated for only a second before pulling out his phone and barking orders into it. By the time the elevator reached the underground garage, a black SUV was idling near the private exit, flanked by 2 sedans. 6 armed men materialized from the shadows, their faces grim and professional. Damien slid into the back seat. Marcus took the front passenger side, already coordinating routes and security sweeps through his earpiece. The convoy pulled out into the storm, cutting through traffic with the kind of aggressive precision that made other drivers swerve and swear. Inside the SUV, Damien stared at his phone. He should call Elena back. He should demand answers, explanations, proof. Instead, he found himself scrolling through his contacts until he reached a name he hadn't used in years. Dr. Cora Cross. His cousin. A trauma surgeon who'd patched up more of his men than he cared to count, always discreet, always efficient. She worked at Mercy General. He dialed. She picked up on the second ring. Damien, it's late. I need information, he said without preamble. Pediatric ICU, room 347, patient admitted recently, critical condition. What can you tell me? A pause. That's confidential patient information. Cora. Another pause, longer this time. Then the sound of fingers tapping on a keyboard. Noah Lane, 6 years old, admitted 4 hours ago with acute symptoms suggesting toxic exposure. They're running a full panel now, but preliminary results show elevated levels of... She stopped. Damien, this child's blood work is bizarre. The toxin profile doesn't match anything in the standard database. Meaning someone with access to very specialized compounds did this deliberately. Cora's voice dropped. This wasn't an accident. This was an attack. Damien's hand tightened on the phone. Is he stable? For now. But if they can't identify the toxin, they can't administer the right treatment. He has maybe 48 hours before organ failure becomes irreversible. A beat. Damien, why are you asking about this child? He ended the call without answering. The hospital loomed ahead, a concrete monolith lit up against the storm. The convoy pulled into the emergency bay, and Damien stepped out into the rain, ignoring the shouts of a security guard trying to wave them toward visitor parking. Marcus flashed a hospital badge, one of many the organization kept on hand for occasions like this, and the guard backed off immediately. Inside, the fluorescent lights were harsh and clinical. Damien moved through the lobby like a force of nature, his security detail fanning out around him. A nurse at the front desk opened her mouth to protest, took one look at his face, and wisely stayed silent. He found the elevator. Pressed the button for the 4th floor. Waited. Marcus stepped in beside him. We don't have a plan here, boss. The plan is simple, Damien said as the doors closed. I find out what happened to my son, and then I find who's responsible. The elevator climbed. Damien watched the numbers tick upward, his mind already cataloging enemies, rivals, anyone who might have discovered Elena's existence and decided she was a vulnerability worth exploiting. The list was long, too long. The doors opened. The pediatric ICU was quiet, save for the rhythmic beeping of monitors and the hushed conversations of night shift nurses. Damien walked past the main desk, following the room numbers until he reached 347. Through the glass partition, he saw her. Elena. She sat in a chair beside a small bed, her head in her hands, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. She looked older than he remembered, exhausted, hollowed out by fear. Her dark hair, once always carefully styled, hung loose and tangled around her face. She wore jeans and a sweater that had seen better days. And in the bed, Surrounded by wires and tubes and machines that beeped with mechanical indifference, lay a boy. Damien stopped breathing. The child was small, pale, his face almost luminous under the harsh hospital lights. Dark hair, same shade as Damien's own. Sharp cheekbones that would grow into strength someday if he lived long enough. And even unconscious, even fighting for every breath, there was something unmistakable in the set of his features. This was his son. The door opened before Damien could decide whether to knock. Elena's head snapped up, eyes red and swollen. For a moment, she just stared at him, shock and relief and something like terror warring across her face. "You came," she whispered. Damien stepped inside, his security detail taking up positions in the hallway. Marcus closed the door quietly, giving them privacy. The room felt impossibly small with Damien in it, his presence filling every corner. "You should have told me," he said. His voice was low, controlled, but underneath it ran a current of something volcanic. Elena stood, swaying slightly. "You walked away. You made it very clear that I was protecting you." Damien moved closer, his eyes locked on the child in the bed. "You think I didn't know what staying would do? You think I wanted to leave?" "You didn't give me a choice," Elena's voice cracked. You decided what was best for both of us, and you left." "What was I supposed to do, Damien? Chase after you? Beg you to stay and watch you put a target on our backs?" "So you kept my son a secret instead." "I kept him safe." Elena was shaking now, fury and fear tangled together. "Do you have any idea how many nights I lay awake terrified that someone would find out? That they'd use him to get to you? I did what I had to do to protect him from your world." Damien turned to face her fully. "And how did that work out?" The words hit like a slap. Elena recoiled, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. You don't get to come in here after 6 years and judge me. I did my best. I did everything alone." "You didn't have to." "Yes, I did." Elena's voice rose, and a nurse glanced through the window with concern. Elena lowered her volume, but not her intensity. "You made your choice. I made mine. And now he's dying because of it." Damien moved to the bedside. Up close, Noah looked even more fragile, his small chest rising and falling with the help of machines. Damien reached out, his hand hovering over the boy's arm, then withdrew. He didn't have the right to touch him. Not yet. "What happened?" he asked quietly. Elena sank back into her chair, exhausted. "He started getting sick 3 days ago. Stomach pain, vomiting, fever. I thought it was the flu. But then he started having seizures and his breathing..." She broke off, pressing her hands to her face. "The doctors ran tests. They think it's some kind of poisoning, but they can't identify the compound. They keep saying the toxicology is inconsistent with known substances." "Where was he before he got sick?" "School, home, the park near our apartment, his normal routine." Elena looked up at him. "I've been so careful, Damien. I don't let him go anywhere without me. I don't talk about you. I don't..." Her voice splintered. "I tried so hard to keep him invisible." Someone found him anyway. The implication hung between them. Elena's face went white. "You think this was deliberate?" "I know it was." Damien pulled out his phone and texted Marcus a single word. "Investigate. This toxin, the symptoms, the timing, this isn't random. Someone targeted him. But why? Who even knows about him?" "That's what I'm going to find out." Damien looked at her directly. "I need a list. Everyone who's been around Noah in the past month. Teachers, babysitters, neighbors, delivery people. Everyone." Elena was already shaking her head. I can't think right now. I can't." "Elena." Damien crouched down so they were eye level. "I know you're scared. I know you hate that I'm here, but right now I'm the only chance Noah has. Someone came after my son, and I will burn this city to the ground to find them. But I need your help." She stared at him, and for the first time since he'd walked through that door, something shifted in her expression. Not trust exactly, but recognition. She knew what he was capable of. She'd always known. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." For the next 30 minutes, Elena walked Damien through Noah's life with painstaking detail. His school, a small private academy in Lincoln Park. His teacher, Mrs. Robertson, who'd been there for 15 years. The babysitter, a college student named Melissa, who picked Noah up twice a week. The neighbors in their building, the parents of his classmates, the regular staff at the coffee shop where Elena worked part-time to supplement her legal aid salary. Damien absorbed it all, his mind building a map of potential access points. Marcus appeared at the door halfway through, tablet in hand. "We've got something," he said quietly. Damien stepped into the hallway. "Talk." Marcus pulled up security footage on his tablet. "This is from Elena's building 2 days ago. Watch the delivery guy." The footage showed a man in a generic courier uniform entering the building's lobby. He spoke briefly to the doorman, then headed for the elevator. Unremarkable, except for one detail. As he waited, his eyes tracked upward, counting floors with the precision of someone who knew exactly where he was going. "That's not normal delivery behavior," Damien said. "No, and check this out." Marcus fast-forwarded to the man leaving 20 minutes later. His bag, which had been full when he entered, was now noticeably lighter. "He delivered something to Elena's floor. We pulled the building's resident list. There were 3 deliveries scheduled that day, none of them for Elena Lane." "Get me his face. Run it through every database we have access to." "Already did." Marcus swiped to a new screen. "His name is Kyle Brennan, former military, dishonorable discharge 3 years ago for conduct violations. Since then, he's been off the grid. No employment records, no address, no digital footprint. Ghost contractor," Damien said. "Someone hired him to make a delivery and then disappear." "That's my read." Marcus glanced back toward Noah's room. "Boss, if this was a professional hit, they'll have backup plans. We need to secure this hospital." Damien was already moving. He pulled out his phone and dialed Cora again. She answered immediately. "I need a favor," he said. "No questions asked." "I'm listening." "Room 347, Pediatric ICU. I need that room turned into a fortress. Private security, controlled access, no one in or out without my explicit approval. And I need it done quietly." A pause. "Damien, if hospital administration finds out, they won't. You're good at making things happen without leaving fingerprints. That's why I'm asking you." He softened his voice slightly. "Please, Cora. This is important." Another pause, longer this time, then, "Give me an hour." She hung up. Damien returned to Noah's room, where Elena was standing now, staring at her son with hollow eyes. She looked up when he entered. "What did you find?" "Someone delivered a package to your apartment 2 days ago. A package you never ordered." Elena's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh God, there was a box outside our door. I thought it was for the neighbor. I didn't—" She swayed and Damien caught her elbow, steadying her. "It was addressed to Noah. I opened it. It was just toys, just stupid toys. A race car, some building blocks. There was no note, no return address. I thought maybe my sister sent them." "Where are they now?" "At home, in his room. He was playing with them the day before he got sick." The color drained from her face. The toys were poisoned." Damien pulled out his phone and texted Marcus. "Get to Elena's apartment. Find the toys. Full hazmat protocol. I need them analyzed within the hour." Marcus's response came back immediately. "On it." Damien turned to Elena. "I'm moving you and Noah to a secure location as soon as he's stable enough for transport." "What?" "No, the doctors can come with us. I have a facility with better equipment than this hospital and complete control over who comes in and out." He saw her objection forming and cut it off. "Elena, someone tried to kill our son. They failed. They're going to try again. This room is not safe. This building is not safe. You need to trust me." "Trust you?" Elena's laugh was bitter. "You left me, Damien. You walked away and didn't look back. Why should I trust you now?" "Because I'm the only one who can keep him alive." The words hung between them, brutal and honest. Elena looked at Noah, then back at Damien. "If I do this, if I let you take us, you don't get to disappear again. You don't get to decide you're too dangerous to be around and vanish. He's your son. If you're in, you're all in." Damien met her eyes. "I'm in." A knock at the door interrupted them. A nurse poked her head in, her expression apologetic. I'm sorry, but visiting hours ended an hour ago. I'll need to ask you to... She stopped mid-sentence, taking in Damien's presence, the security detail visible through the window, the sudden shift in the room's atmosphere. I'll come back later. She fled. Elena turned to Damien. What did you do? Made sure no one questions why I'm here. He checked his watch. Cora's arranging security upgrades for this room. In the meantime, I'm not leaving. Neither is my team. The hospital won't allow... The hospital will allow whatever I tell them to allow. Damien's voice was flat, matter-of-fact. Elena, you need to understand something. The man you knew 6 years ago, the one who tried to keep you at arm's length from his world, he's gone. That world has bled into this one. Our son is lying in that bed because of who I am, and now I'm going to use every resource, every connection, every ounce of power I've built to make sure he survives. And when he does, I'm going to find the people who did this, and I'm going to end them. Elena stared at him. You're talking about murder. I'm talking about justice. Damien moved closer to the bed again, his eyes on Noah. This child is innocent. He didn't ask to be born into my life, but he's here, and he's mine. And anyone who touches him forfeits their right to breathe. That's not justice, Damien. That's revenge. Sometimes they're the same thing. Before Elena could respond, Marcus appeared again, his face grim. Boss, we have a problem. I sent a team to Elena's apartment like you asked. The door was already open. The place had been tossed, drawers pulled out, furniture overturned, and the toys were gone. Damien's jaw clenched. Someone's cleaning up. That's not all. Marcus glanced at Elena, then back to Damien. We found traces of the same toxin on the apartment's air vent. They didn't just deliver poisoned toys. They contaminated the whole space. Elena made a small, broken sound. Damien turned to her. Where's your sister? Anyone else who might have been in that apartment? My sister lives in Milwaukee. She hasn't visited in months. It's just been me and Noah. Elena was trembling now, the full horror of it sinking in. They came into my home. They poisoned my home. Our home, Damien corrected quietly. Our son. And they're going to pay for it. He pulled Elena into his arms before she could collapse, holding her upright as she finally let herself break. Over her head, he met Marcus's eyes and gave a single, silent command. Find them. Marcus nodded and disappeared. Damien held Elena while she cried, one hand on her back, the other reaching out to rest gently on Noah's foot, the first time he'd touched his son. The boy didn't stir, lost in whatever twilight world the toxin had dragged him into. But Damien made a promise to him anyway, silent and absolute. I will find who did this. I will make them answer for it. And I will make sure you wake up in a world where no one will ever hurt you again. In the hallway, Cora Cross arrived with a team of private security contractors dressed as hospital staff. She caught Damien's eye through the window and nodded once. The fortress was being built. And somewhere in Chicago, the people who'd tried to kill Noah Lane had no idea that they'd just woken a monster. The hunt had begun. The security contractors moved through the pediatric wing like shadows, their hospital badges flawless forgeries, their movements practiced and silent. Within 90 minutes, Cora had transformed the 4th floor into a controlled zone. New cameras appeared in the hallway corners. Access points were quietly rerouted. The nurses' station received a polite but firm directive from administration. Room 347 was now under specialized care protocols, and only pre-approved medical staff would be permitted entry. No one questioned it. Mercy General had seen enough of Damien Cross's reach over the years to know when to look the other way. Inside the room, Elena had stopped crying but hadn't let go of Noah's hand. She sat rigid in the chair, her eyes tracking every beep of the monitors, every slight change in his breathing. Damien stood at the window, phone pressed to his ear, his voice low and controlled as he coordinated the lockdown. I want a full background on every person who's had contact with that apartment building in the past month, he said into the phone. Security guards, cleaning staff, maintenance workers, residents, everyone. On the other end, Marcus's voice crackled with efficiency. Already running it. We've also got teams sweeping Elena's workplace, Noah's school, everywhere they've been in the past 2 weeks. Good. And the toxin analysis? Lab's working on it now. We pulled samples from the apartment ventilation system. Dr. Reeves says it's complex, custom-made, not something you buy off the street. Military-grade precision in the formulation. Damien's grip tightened on the phone. So we're looking for someone with serious resources, or serious connections to someone with resources. Marcus paused. Boss, there's something else. The doorman at Elena's building? He admitted he was paid $500 cash to look the other way when that delivery came through. Said a woman approached him 2 weeks ago, told him a courier would be coming with a special package, and he should make sure it got upstairs without questions. Description? 30s, professional dress, dark hair, spoke with what he called a medical accent, like a doctor, scientist. Damien's eyes narrowed. A woman. Yeah. He couldn't give us much more than that, but we're working with a sketch artist now. Send me the sketch the second you have it. Damien ended the call and turned back to the room. Elena was watching him, her face pale but composed. You're building something, she said quietly. A case, a target list. I'm gathering information. Don't lie to me, Damien. Elena's voice was steady despite the exhaustion bleeding through. I know what you do. I've always known. When you start making calls like that, someone ends up dead. Damien crossed the room and sat in the chair beside her, close enough that their knees almost touched. Would that bother you? If the people who poisoned our son ended up dead? Elena looked at Noah, then back at Damien. Ask me again when he wakes up. Right now I don't care about anything except keeping him alive. Then we want the same thing. A soft knock interrupted them. Cora stepped inside, her white coat pristine, her expression professionally neutral. She'd changed since Damien had last seen her, traded her surgical scrubs for the polished armor of an attending physician. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her eyes moved quickly from Damien to Elena to Noah with clinical assessment. I've reviewed his charts, Cora said without preamble. The toxicology team is stumped. Whatever compound was used, it's breaking down rapidly in his system, which is why they can't isolate it. But it's left damage, hepatic inflammation, early-stage renal dysfunction, neurological markers that suggest microvascular injury. Elena's breath caught. In English, please. Cora's expression softened slightly. His liver and kidneys are struggling. The poison attacked his blood vessels, particularly the small ones in his brain. If we can stabilize him through the next 48 hours and support his organs while his body clears the toxin, he has a chance. But it's going to be close. What do you need? Damien asked. Better equipment than what's in this room. I want him on advanced dialysis to help clear his blood faster, more sophisticated neurological monitoring, and access to experimental therapies that aren't approved for standard use. Cora met his eyes. Which means I need you to authorize moving him to the Cross Medical Facility. Elena stiffened. What facility? A private treatment center I maintain for situations like this, Damien explained. Top-tier equipment, hand-picked staff, complete security control. You mean a place where your criminals get patched up after shootouts, Elena said flatly. Cora raised an eyebrow. Actually, it's where I conduct cutting-edge research that wouldn't be approved through traditional channels. The equipment is better than anything you'll find at Mercy General. If you want your son to have the best chance, that's where he needs to be. Elena turned to Damien. And if I say no, then we stay here and hope the hospital's limitations don't kill him before his body recovers. Damien leaned forward. Elena, I know you don't trust me. I know you hate that I'm here, that this is happening. But Cora's right. Noah needs more than what Mercy can provide. He needs his mother to make smart choices, Elena shot back. Not to hand him over to... She stopped herself, but the damage was done. Cora stepped back toward the door. I'll give you two a moment. She left, closing the door quietly behind her. The silence stretched between them, heavy and fraught. Finally, Damien spoke, his voice careful. You were going to say, hand him over to a criminal. Yes. Elena didn't look away. Because that's what you are, Damien. I fell in love with you 6 years ago thinking I could change you, thinking love would be enough to pull you out of that world. I was wrong. And I spent 6 years making sure Noah wouldn't pay the price for my mistake. And now he's paying it anyway, Damien said quietly. Elena flinched. That's not fair. No, it's not. Nothing about this is fair. Damien stood and moved to the window, his back to her. You kept him secret to protect him. I stayed away to protect you both. We both made choices we thought were right, and now our son is dying because someone found him anyway. Someone from your world. Yes. He turned to face her. Someone from my world, which means I'm the one who can navigate that world to find them. I'm the one who knows how these people think, how they operate. And I'm the one with the resources to make sure that when we find them, they can never hurt anyone again. Elena stood slowly, her legs unsteady. You keep saying we, because it is we. Whether you like it or not, we're in this together now. You, me, Noah. Damien's voice dropped. I walked away 6 years ago because I thought it was the right thing to do. I thought cutting you loose would keep you safe. I was wrong. So I'm not walking away again. Not from him. Not from you. Not until this is over. And then what? Elena's voice broke. You ride off into the sunset and we go back to pretending you don't exist? That depends on you. Before Elena could respond, the door burst open. Marcus stood there, his face grim, tablet in hand. Boss, we've got the sketch. You need to see this. Damien crossed the room in 3 strides and took the tablet. The image on the screen showed a woman in her mid-30s with sharp features, intelligent eyes, and dark hair pulled back from her face. Professional, polished, vaguely familiar. Elena appeared at his shoulder. Who is that? I don't know, Damien said slowly. But something about the woman's face nagged at him, a ghost of recognition he couldn't quite place. He handed the tablet back to Marcus. Run this through facial recognition. Check medical databases, research institutions, pharmaceutical companies. If she has the knowledge to create a custom toxin, she's got credentials somewhere. On it, Marcus hesitated. There's more. The lab finished the preliminary analysis on the toxin samples from the apartment. And? It's a bioengineered compound, not just military grade, experimental, the kind of thing you'd only see in black-budget research programs or extremely specialized pharmaceutical development. Marcus pulled up a second screen showing complex molecular diagrams. Dr. Reeves says whoever made this had access to cutting-edge biotechnology and a deep understanding of how to manipulate cellular pathways. Damien studied the diagrams. So we're looking for a scientist, someone with resources and expertise, and someone who wanted Noah specifically, Marcus added. This wasn't a random attack. The delivery was targeted, the dosing was calibrated for a child his size, and the compound was designed to break down rapidly to avoid detection. This was planned meticulously. Elena grabbed Damien's arm. Why would anyone want to hurt Noah? He's 6 years old. He's nobody. We're nobody. You're not nobody, Damien said quietly. You're connected to me. But you said you kept us secret. You said no one knew. I thought I had. Damien's mind was racing, cataloging possibilities. But someone found out. Someone did their research, identified you and Noah, and decided he was valuable enough to target. Marcus's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his expression darkened. Facial recognition just came back. Boss, you're not going to like this. Damien took the tablet again. The screen showed the sketch alongside a database photo. Same woman, same sharp features. But the name beneath made his blood run cold. Dr. Vivian Cross. PhD in molecular biology. Specialization in pediatric gene therapy. Last known employment, GeneSys Research Initiative, a biotech firm with ties to pharmaceutical giants, and according to Marcus's quickly compiled notes, several red-flagged government contracts. Damien stared at the screen. Cross. Elena looked between him and the photo. Is she related to you? I don't know. It's not an uncommon name. But even as he said it, Damien was scrolling through his mental catalog of family connections. The Cross family tree was complicated. His father had siblings scattered across the country, cousins he'd never met, relatives who'd distanced themselves from the criminal branch of the family decades ago. Marcus was already typing furiously. Pulling genealogical records now. If there's a connection, we'll find it. The door opened again and Cora stepped back inside. She froze when she saw the image on the tablet. Where did you get that? Damien's eyes locked on her. You know her. Cora moved closer, her professional composure slipping for just a moment. That's Dr. Vivian Cross. She stopped, her face going carefully blank. She's a distant relative, second cousin maybe? We met a few times at family gatherings years ago. She was always brilliant, top of her field. Last I heard, she was doing groundbreaking work in genetic medicine. She's also the woman who paid Elena's doorman to let a poisoned delivery through, Damien said flatly. Cora's face went white. That's not possible. Vivian wouldn't. She's a doctor. She saves children. She doesn't. She looked at Noah in the bed, then back at the photo. There has to be a mistake. The doorman identified her from this sketch, Marcus said, and the toxin used on Noah matches the kind of research her company specializes in. It's not a mistake. Cora sank into a chair, her hands trembling. I don't understand. Why would Vivian target a child? What could she possibly gain? Damien crouched in front of her, his voice low and controlled. I need you to tell me everything you know about her, where she works, who she works with, what her research focuses on. Everything. Cora nodded slowly. GeneSys Research Initiative. They're based in a private facility north of the city, near Lake Forest. Vivian heads their pediatric gene therapy division. Her focus is on developing treatments for genetic disorders in children, experimental protocols that push the boundaries of what's ethically approved. Meaning? Meaning she's willing to test therapies that the FDA won't touch. She's been under investigation a few times for conducting unauthorized trials, but nothing ever stuck. She's too connected, too valuable to the company. Cora's voice dropped. There were rumors a few years ago that she'd moved beyond therapy into enhancement, genetic modification designed not to fix disorders, but to improve baseline human performance, intelligence, physical capabilities, disease resistance. Elena's voice cut through the room like a knife. You're saying she's experimenting on children. I'm saying she's operating in ethical gray areas that most scientists won't touch. Cora met Elena's eyes. But I never thought she'd hurt a child. Her work was always about helping them. Unless she found a child she thought was worth more as a test subject than a patient, Damien said quietly. He stood and turned to Marcus. Find out everything about GeneSys, funding sources, board members, research contracts. I want to know who's protecting her and why. Marcus was already moving. I'll have a full report in an hour. Damien's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and saw a message from his lead investigator. Found something in Elena's medical records. You need to see this. He stepped into the hallway and called back. The investigator, a former FBI analyst named Sarah Chen, answered immediately. What did you find? Damien asked. Elena Lane's medical history shows she had genetic screening done during her pregnancy with Noah. Standard prenatal testing, nothing unusual. But here's the thing. Those records were accessed illegally 6 months ago. Someone hacked into the hospital database and pulled Noah's genetic profile. Damien's grip on the phone tightened. Who? The hack was sophisticated, routed through multiple proxies, but I traced it back to an IP address registered to GeneSys Research Initiative. Everything clicked into place. They've been watching him. They knew about Noah before anyone even tried to hurt him. It looks that way. And boss, there's more. I cross-referenced Noah's genetic markers with GeneSys's published research. His DNA profile matches the criteria for a study they've been trying to recruit for, something about rare genetic combinations that enhance cellular regeneration. Noah's genes are apparently exceptional for their purposes. Damien closed his eyes. They wanted to use him, or study him, or both. The details of the research are classified, but based on what I could dig up, GeneSys has been looking for children with specific genetic markers for years. Noah's profile would have made him a perfect candidate. Except Elena would never consent to that. Which is why they tried to take him another way, Sarah said quietly. If the child is critically ill and the parent is desperate, consent becomes a lot easier to obtain. Or if the child dies, maybe they get access to tissue samples for study. Either way, they win. Damien felt rage building in his chest, cold and controlled. Send me everything you have, every detail, every connection. I want a complete picture of what we're dealing with. Already on its way to your secure server. Damien, be careful. GeneSys has powerful backers, politicians, pharmaceutical executives, people with enough influence to bury problems. If you go after them, you're going to make enemies in places that matter. I've been making enemies my whole life, Damien said. A few more won't make a difference. He ended the call and returned to the room. Elena and Cora were talking in low voices, but they stopped when he entered. Damien looked at both of them. I know why they targeted Noah, he said. He has a genetic profile they want. GeneSys has been looking for children like him to use in experimental research. They accessed his medical records illegally 6 months ago, identified him as a candidate, and when Elena wouldn't have agreed to enroll him in their program, they decided to create a situation where they could study him anyway. Elena's face drained of color. They poisoned him to get access to him? Or to get access to his body if he died? Either way, they saw him as valuable genetic material, not a person. Damien's voice was ice. They gambled with his life for research data. Cora stood abruptly. That's insane. Even Vivian wouldn't... She stopped, uncertainty flickering across her face. Would she? You tell me, Damien said. You know her. Is she capable of this? Cora was silent for a long moment, then quietly. She always said science required sacrifice, that progress meant pushing boundaries, even when it made people uncomfortable. I thought she was talking about ethical debates, not... She looked at Noah. Not hurting children to get what she wanted? Damien pulled out his phone and pulled up the file Sarah had sent. GeneSys has been running unauthorized trials for years. Children with rare genetic profiles admitted to their facility for experimental treatment, parents pressured to sign consent forms they don't fully understand. At least 3 cases where children died under suspicious circumstances, and the families received large settlements in exchange for silence. Elena made a choked sound. They're killing children. They're experimenting on them, Damien corrected. And when the experiments fail, they cover it up. Noah's profile made him a target. The fact that he's connected to me just made them more cautious about how they approached it. So what do we do? Elena's voice was shaking but determined. How do we stop them? Damien met her eyes. We don't. I do. No. Elena stood, her hands clenched into fists. He's my son. I have just as much right. You have every right, Damien interrupted. But you don't have the resources, you don't have the connections, and you don't have the stomach for what needs to happen next. His voice softened. I know you, Elena. You're a public defender. You believe in justice through the system, in due process and legal accountability. But the people who did this to Noah operate outside that system. They've bought protection, buried evidence, silenced witnesses. The law won't touch them. Then we make it touch them. We go to the FBI, we bring evidence, and they bury it, Damien said. Or worse, they tip off GeneSys and everyone involved disappears before we can build a case. These people have too much power, too many connections. The only way to stop them is to hit them where they can't hide. Elena shook her head. You're talking about murder again. I'm talking about justice. That's not justice, that's revenge. Then call it revenge. Damien's control finally cracked, his voice rising. Call it whatever you want, but our son is lying in that bed fighting for his life because someone decided he was worth more as a lab specimen than a living child. So yes, I'm going to find the people responsible and I'm going to make sure they can never do this again. If that makes me a monster, fine. I've been called worse. Elena stared at him, breathing hard. You'll end up in prison. Or dead. And then what happens to Noah? I won't end up in prison, Damien said quietly. I'm very good at not getting caught. Before Elena could respond, an alarm shrieked from the monitors beside Noah's bed. All 3 of them spun toward the sound. Noah's small body had gone rigid, his back arching off the mattress, his monitors flashing red warnings. Seizure! Cora was already moving, hitting the call button and pulling emergency supplies from the crash cart. Damien, get Elena out of here. No! Elena lunged toward Noah, but Damien caught her around the waist, pulling her back as Cora worked. A team of nurses burst through the door, responding to the alarm. Cora barked orders, medications, dosages, monitoring adjustments. Her voice calm and authoritative despite the chaos. Damien held Elena as she fought against him, her screams tearing through the room. Let me go! That's my son! Noah! Let them work, Damien said into her ear, his arms locked around her. Elena, let them work. The seizure lasted 90 seconds, though it felt like hours. When it finally stopped, Noah lay limp and pale, his breathing shallow. Cora checked his vitals, her movements efficient and practiced. The nurses stepped back, waiting for instructions. Stabilizing, Cora said finally, but his neurological function is deteriorating faster than I expected. The toxin must have done more damage than the initial scans showed. She looked at Damien. We need to move him. Now. Mercy General doesn't have the equipment to handle this level of neurological trauma. Damien released Elena slowly. She sagged against him, all the fight gone out of her. Okay, she whispered. Okay. Move him. Do whatever you have to do. Just save him. Cora nodded and turned to the nurses. Prepare him for transport. I want a full crash team ready, advanced life support, and a direct route to the Cross Medical Facility. No delays. The nurses moved immediately, disconnecting monitors and preparing Noah for transfer. Damien pulled out his phone and sent a single text to Marcus. Transport in motion. Secure the route. No interference. The response came back in seconds. Route secured. Transport team standing by. Within 20 minutes, Noah was loaded into a specially equipped ambulance that looked like standard medical transport but carried equipment worth more than most people earned in a lifetime. Cora rode in back with him, her hands steady on the monitors. Elena sat beside her, holding Noah's hand. Damien followed in the SUV with Marcus, his security detail forming a protective convoy around the ambulance. Through the rain-slicked streets of Chicago, they moved like a military operation, traffic mysteriously clearing ahead of them, intersections controlled by men in dark suits who materialized and vanished with practiced efficiency. Jeance's facility is 40 minutes north, Marcus said, pulling up maps on his tablet. Heavy security, private access road, probably a dozen guards minimum. I'm not hitting them tonight, Damien said. Marcus looked surprised. Boss? Tonight, I focus on Noah, getting him stable, keeping him safe. But once he's secure, Damien's voice went cold. Then we go hunting. The Cross Medical Facility rose out of the industrial district like a fortress disguised as a hospital. Modern architecture, tinted windows, and enough security to make most government buildings jealous. The ambulance pulled into an underground entrance, and within minutes, Noah was being transferred to a private suite that looked more like a luxury hotel room than a hospital ward. Except for the equipment. Floor-to-ceiling monitors, advanced dialysis machines, neurological scanners that could map brain activity in real time. Cora moved through the space like a conductor, orchestrating Noah's care with absolute authority. Elena stood in the corner, overwhelmed and exhausted. Damien appeared beside her with a bottle of water. Drink, he said quietly. She took it without arguing, her hand shaking as she opened the cap. This place, it's like something out of a science fiction movie. It's where I bring people who matter, Damien said. And right now nothing matters more than him. Elena looked at him. Thank you. For this. For... Her voice broke. For being here. I should have been here all along, Damien said. That's on me. They stood in silence, watching as Cora and her team worked to stabilize Noah. Hours blurred together. Elena eventually collapsed into a chair, falling into an exhausted sleep. Damien stood watch at the window, his mind already planning the next move. At dawn, Marcus appeared with news. We've located Vivian Cross. She's scheduled to be at the Jeance's facility tomorrow for a board meeting. Big presentation on her latest research findings. Damien turned from the window. Perfect. That gives us 24 hours to plan. Plan what exactly? A visit, Damien said. I want to ask Dr. Cross some questions, and I want to make sure she understands exactly what happens to people who hurt my family. Marcus left to coordinate surveillance on the Jeance's facility, while Damien remained at the window, watching dawn break over Chicago's skyline. Behind him, machines beeped steadily, monitoring Noah's fragile progress. The boy had stabilized, not improved, but stabilized, and Cora had cautiously suggested that his body was beginning to fight back against the toxin's assault. Elena stirred in her chair, blinking awake with the disoriented confusion of someone who'd fallen asleep mid-crisis. She looked immediately to Noah, saw the steady rise and fall of his chest, and some of the tension left her shoulders. You should go home, Damien said without turning from the window. Get some real sleep, a shower, clean clothes. I'm not leaving him. Elena, I said I'm not leaving him. Her voice was raw but firm. You can stand there and make plans to hunt down the people who did this, but I'm staying with my son. Damien finally turned to face her. Our son. The correction hung between them. Elena's expression flickered. Anger, grief, something that might have been hope, before settling back into exhaustion. Our son, she agreed quietly. Which means you don't get to make all the decisions anymore. I'm not trying to... Yes, you are. That's what you do, Damien. You assess the situation, make the call, and expect everyone else to fall in line. Elena stood, crossing to Noah's bedside. She smoothed his hair back from his forehead with gentle fingers. But this isn't one of your operations. This is our child's life. And I need to know what you're planning before you disappear to do whatever violent thing you think will fix this. Damien moved closer, keeping his voice low so the medical staff working quietly in the corner wouldn't hear. I'm planning to find out exactly what GeneSys wanted with Noah, who authorized it, and how deep this goes. Then I'm going to make sure it never happens to another child. By killing them. If necessary. Elena closed her eyes. I spent 6 years trying to keep him away from this. From violence, from blood, from the kind of moral compromises you make every day. And now, here we are anyway. You think I wanted this? Damien's control slipped for a moment. You think I wanted to walk in here and find out I have a son who's dying because of who I am? I would give anything to go back and make different choices. But I can't. All I can do is move forward and make sure the people responsible pay for what they've done. And then what? You think revenge will make you feel better? You think it'll undo the damage? No, but it'll stop them from doing it again. Elena turned to look at him directly. Will it? Or will it just create new enemies, new threats, new reasons for someone to come after us? Because that's how your world works, Damien. Violence begets violence. You kill their people, they kill yours. It never ends. It ends when I make it end, Damien said quietly. That's the difference between me and most people in my business. I don't just react. I finish things. Before Elena could respond, Cora appeared from the equipment bay, stripping off her gloves. His kidney function is improving. Slowly, but it's measurable progress. If this trend continues, we might be able to reduce dialysis support by tomorrow evening. Elena's breath caught. He's getting better? His body is responding to treatment. That's not the same as getting better, but it's a good sign. Cora glanced at Damien. I need to talk to you, privately. Damien followed her into the hallway, leaving Elena with Noah. Once they were out of earshot, Cora's professional composure cracked. I called Vivian, she said. Damien went very still. You did what? I called her. I needed to know if she was really involved in this. Cora's hands were shaking. I told her I was treating a child who'd been poisoned with a compound that matched her research signature. I asked if she knew anything about it. And? She hung up on me. But before she did, there was this pause. This moment where I could hear her thinking, calculating, and I knew. Cora's voice dropped to a whisper. She did this, Damien. My cousin, my family. She poisoned a child for her research. What exactly did you tell her? Just that I had a patient with an unusual toxin profile. I didn't mention Noah by name, didn't say anything about you or Elena, but she's smart. If she's been tracking him, she'll put it together. Cora pressed her hands to her face. I'm sorry. I needed to believe there was some other explanation. Damien pulled out his phone and texted Marcus. Vivian Cross knows we're on to her. Accelerate timeline. I want eyes on that facility within the hour. Marcus's response came back immediately. Already moving. We've got satellite surveillance and a team prepping for insertion. Damien turned back to Cora. You may have just tipped our hand, but maybe that's not a bad thing. If Vivian knows we're coming, she'll make moves. And when people panic, they make mistakes. What kind of moves? Destroying evidence, contacting co-conspirators, running. Damien's eyes were cold. All of which gives us more information about who else is involved. Cora straightened, some of her professional steel returning. I want to help. Whatever you're planning, I want in. No. Damien, you're a doctor. You save lives. That's what you do best, and right now, that's what Noah needs. Let me handle the rest. She's my family too, Cora said. My responsibility. She's a criminal who hurt a child. That makes her my responsibility. Damien's tone softened slightly. Stay with Noah. Keep him alive. That's how you help. Cora nodded reluctantly and returned to the treatment room. Damien stayed in the hallway, his mind already racing through contingencies. If Vivian knew they were investigating, she'd warn her partners at Genesys. They'd start covering tracks, moving assets, preparing defenses, which meant Damien's window for action was narrowing rapidly. His phone buzzed with an incoming call from Marcus. "Talk to me," Damien answered. "We've got a problem. Genesys just went into lockdown. All non-essential personnel evacuated, security doubled, and they've activated some kind of data purge protocol. Whatever they're trying to hide, they're doing it right now." Damien swore under his breath. "How long until your team is in position?" 20 minutes. "But boss, if they're destroying evidence, then we move faster. I'm coming to you." Damien was already walking toward the elevator. "Keep surveillance active and prep for immediate insertion. I want to know every person who leaves that building and where they go." "You're not thinking of hitting them in broad daylight." "I'm thinking of stopping them before they erase everything that connects them to Noah." Damien stepped into the elevator. "Assemble the team, full tactical gear. I'll meet you at the staging point." He ended the call and texted Elena. "Something's come up. Stay with Noah. Cora will keep you updated. I'll be back soon." The elevator descended into the facility's underground garage, where a fresh SUV waited with engine running. Damien slid into the back seat, and the driver pulled out immediately, heading north toward Lake Forest. The staging point was an abandoned warehouse 2 miles from the Genesys facility, carefully selected for its sightlines and quick access to multiple escape routes. When Damien arrived, Marcus had already assembled a team of 8 men, all former military, all completely loyal, all equipped with the kind of hardware that would make most police departments jealous. Marcus handed Damien a tactical vest and earpiece. Satellite shows approximately 15 security personnel on site, all concentrated around the main research building. There's a service entrance on the east side that's less monitored. That's our best insertion point. Damien studied the satellite imagery on Marcus's tablet. The Genesys facility sprawled across 10 acres, a cluster of modern buildings surrounded by manicured lawns and high fences. The main research building was the largest structure, 5 stories of glass and steel designed to project innovation and transparency while hiding God knew what behind those reflective windows. "What about Vivian?" Damien asked. "Her car's still in the executive parking area. She hasn't left since Cora's call." Marcus zoomed in on the building's floor plan. "Her office is on the 4th floor, northwest corner. If she's destroying evidence, that's where she'll be doing it." "Then that's where we go." Damien checked the weapon Marcus handed him, a sleek pistol with a suppressor already attached. "Rules of engagement. We're not here to kill anyone unless they make it necessary. This is intelligence gathering and evidence seizure. But if they try to stop us, we stop them first," Marcus finished. "Team's ready when you are, boss." Damien looked at the men assembled around him. Hard faces, steady hands, the kind of professionals who didn't ask questions when the job required crossing lines. "We go in quiet, we get what we need, and we get out. Anyone who sees us and tries to sound an alarm gets neutralized, non-lethally if possible, permanently if necessary. Questions?" No one spoke. "Good. Let's move." The team loaded into 3 vehicles and drove the 2 miles to Genesys with careful spacing, looking like nothing more than morning traffic. They parked at a strip mall across from the facility and approached on foot, using the tree line for cover. The east service entrance was exactly where the satellite imagery showed it, a plain steel door with a card reader and a security camera. One of Marcus's men, a former NSA analyst named Torres, pulled out a small device and connected it to the card reader. 30 seconds later, the lock clicked open. "Camera's on a loop," Torres whispered. "We've got a 2-minute window before it resets." They slipped inside. The interior of Genesys was all sterile white corridors and fluorescent lighting, the kind of environment designed to feel clinical and safe, while conducting research that was anything but. Damien led the team toward the emergency stairwell, avoiding the main elevators and their inevitable security feeds. They climbed to the 4th floor in silence. At each landing, Marcus checked his tablet, monitoring the security system they'd infiltrated. 3 guards on 4, all clustered near the main elevator bay. "Vivian's office is clear. She's alone." Damien nodded and eased the stairwell door open. The 4th floor corridor stretched out before them, empty except for the distant sound of voices near the elevators. They moved in formation, clearing corners and doorways with practiced efficiency. Vivian's office door was closed but unlocked. Damien tested the handle slowly, then pushed it open. Doctor. Vivian Cross stood at her desk, feeding documents into an industrial shredder. She looked exactly like her photograph, sharp features, intelligent eyes, dark hair pulled back severely. Except now those eyes were wide with shock as 8 armed men flooded into her office. Step away from the shredder, Damien said quietly. Vivian's hand hovered over the document feed, frozen in indecision. Then she lunged for the panic button on her desk. Marcus was faster. He crossed the room in 2 strides and grabbed her wrist, twisting her arm behind her back and forcing her face first onto the desk. I wouldn't, he said pleasantly. Damien approached the shredder and examined the half-destroyed documents. Research protocols, test results, consent forms with signatures that looked suspiciously similar. Torres, pull the hard drives from every computer in this office. Marcus, search her files. I want everything.
You can't just break in here, Vivian gasped against the desk. This is private property. I'll have you arrested. By who? Damien crouched down so they were eye level. The police you've been paying to look the other way? The politicians whose campaigns you've funded? Gene Sis has spent years buying protection, Dr. Cross. But you forgot to buy protection from me. Vivian's eyes widened with recognition. You're Damien Cross, the crime lord. I prefer concerned father. Damien pulled out his phone and showed her a photo of Noah in the hospital bed. Recognize him? Vivian's face went carefully blank. I don't know what you're talking about. Really? Because your company illegally accessed his medical records 6 months ago. You identified him as a candidate for your research program. And when his mother wouldn't consent to experimentation, you poisoned him. Damien's voice was glacier cold. So let's skip the part where you pretend to be innocent and move straight to the part where you tell me everything. I'm a scientist conducting legitimate research. You're a criminal conducting illegal human trials on children. Damien stood and nodded to Marcus. Show her what we found. Marcus pulled up files on his tablet, the evidence Sarah Chen had compiled. Gene Sis has been tracking children with rare genetic profiles for 3 years. At least 15 children admitted to your experimental treatment program, 7 of whom died under suspicious circumstances. The families were paid off, the deaths were ruled as complications from underlying conditions, and the research continued. Vivian's composure cracked. Those children were dying anyway. We gave them a chance. You used them as test subjects without informed consent, Damien interrupted. And when they died, you harvested their tissue for continued research. That's not medicine, that's butchery. You don't understand the science. I understand that you tried to kill my 6-year-old son to get access to his DNA. Damien leaned closer. And I understand that you're going to tell me exactly who authorized this program, who funded it, and who else is involved. Because right now, Dr. Cross, you're looking at spending the rest of your life in a very dark hole. But if you cooperate, maybe you walk away with your life. Vivian's eyes darted toward the door. My security team is currently dealing with a false alarm we triggered on the 2nd floor, Marcus said. You're alone, Doctor. Just you and us. For a long moment, Vivian said nothing. Then, quietly, if I tell you, they'll kill me. If you don't tell me, I'll kill you, Damien said flatly. Choose. Vivian closed her eyes. The program is called Project Genesis. It's funded by a consortium of pharmaceutical companies and private investors who believe that genetic enhancement is the future of human evolution. We identify children with exceptional genetic markers, disease resistance, cellular regeneration, enhanced cognitive potential, and we study them. We were developing therapies that could be sold for millions to parents who want to give their children advantages. By poisoning the children first. By creating controlled medical crises that would make parents desperate enough to consent to experimental treatments they'd normally refuse. Vivian's voice was hollow. We'd identify a candidate, introduce a carefully calibrated toxin that mimics a rare disease, then offer our experimental therapy as the only hope. Parents sign the consent forms, we collect the data we need, and if the child survives, everyone wins. And if they don't survive? Then we have unlimited access to their tissue for continued research. Vivian opened her eyes. You think I'm a monster, but this research will save millions of lives.
The therapies we're developing could eliminate genetic diseases, extend human lifespan, create a generation of children who never know illness. Built on the corpses of children you murdered, Damien said. Who else is involved? Names. Vivian hesitated. Damien pulled out his pistol and set it on the desk between them, the suppressor pointing directly at her. Names, he repeated. Dr. Richard Ashford, CEO of GeneSys. Dr. Michael Reeves, head of biochemistry. He designed the toxins. Sarah Thornton, our legal counsel. She handled the liability issues. And Vivian swallowed hard. And there are others. Investors, board members, people with enough power to bury this if it ever came to light. Write them down. Damien slid a notepad across the desk. Every name, every connection, every detail you can remember. Vivian picked up a pen with shaking hands and began writing. As she did, Torres emerged from the inner office carrying 3 external hard drives. Got everything from her computer system. Looks like there's encrypted files too. I'll need time to crack them. Take all the time you need, Damien said. We're not in a hurry anymore. A sudden alarm shrieked through the building. Marcus's earpiece crackled with urgent chatter. Boss, security's figured out we're here. They're sealing the building and calling for backup. Damien looked at Vivian. Is there another way out of this floor? She shook her head. The emergency exits are all monitored. You're trapped. Then I guess we're doing this the hard way. Damien took the notepad, now filled with names and details, and folded it into each other's jacket. Marcus, take 3 men and secure the east stairwell. Torres, you're with me. We're getting Dr. Cross out of here. What? No. Vivian backed away. I'm not going anywhere with you. You just confessed to multiple counts of murder and conspiracy. You really think I'm going to leave you here to recant everything the moment we're gone? Damien grabbed her arm. You're coming with us. Whether you walk or I carry you is your choice. Vivian looked at the gun still sitting on her desk, then at Damien's face, and apparently decided cooperation was her best option. Fine, but if your people shoot me, the deal's off. My people don't miss, Damien said, so I'd suggest staying close. They moved into the corridor just as elevator doors opened and 4 security guards emerged, weapons drawn. Marcus's team was already in position, and what followed was brutal and efficient. Suppressed gunfire cracked through the hallway. 2 guards went down immediately, their Kevlar vests absorbing the shots but the impact knocking them unconscious. The other 2 retreated back into the elevator, and Marcus tossed a flashbang after them. The explosion was deafening in the confined space. Move! Damien hauled Vivian toward the stairwell while Marcus's team provided cover. Behind them, more alarms joined the cacophony, and the building's PA system crackled to life with automated warnings about security breaches and lockdown protocols. They hit the stairwell at a run. Below them, the sound of boots on metal stairs signaled more guards ascending. Above them, the roof access was locked with a heavy steel door. Torres, can you open it? Damien asked. Torres was already working on the electronic lock. 30 seconds. We don't have 30 seconds, Marcus said, peering down the stairwell. They're coming up fast. Damien handed Vivian off to one of his men and pulled out his pistol. Hold this position. No one gets through. The next 60 seconds were chaos. Guards burst into the stairwell from below, and Damien's team met them with precise, controlled fire. The confined space worked in both directions. Nowhere to hide, but also nowhere to maneuver. Bodies fell, some wounded, some unconscious from stun rounds. The noise was tremendous despite the suppressors. Got it! Torres threw open the roof access door. They spilled onto the roof into cold morning wind. Lake Michigan stretched out in the distance, gray and choppy. Below them, the GeneSys compound was swarming with security personnel, and in the distance, Damien could hear approaching sirens. Extraction point? Damien asked Marcus. North side behind the tree line, but we'll never make it across the open ground without getting lit up. Marcus was scanning the perimeter with tactical binoculars. They've got shooters positioning on the adjacent buildings. Damien pulled out his phone and made a call. It was answered on the first ring. I need an exit, he said without preamble. North side of the GeneSys facility, roof access. 5 minutes. That's going to be expensive, a voice responded. A helicopter pilot Damien had used for similar emergencies over the years. Bill me. Damien ended the call and turned to his team. Helicopter extraction, 3 minutes. Defensive positions until then. They spread out across the roof, using HVAC units and ventilation structures for cover. Below, the stairwell door burst open and guards poured out, weapons raised. The firefight that followed was loud and ugly, the sound of gunfire echoing across the compound. Vivian huddled behind an air conditioning unit, her hands over her ears, her carefully constructed professional identity shattering with each bullet that ricocheted off metal. Damien crouched beside her, returning fire with mechanical precision. "This is insane!" she screamed over the noise. "This is what happens when you poison children," Damien shouted back. "Welcome to consequences." The helicopter appeared over the tree line like an avenging angel, a sleek black aircraft that dropped toward the roof with aggressive speed. The pilot, a taciturn veteran named Kozlov, who asked no questions and forgot everything he saw, held the aircraft steady 3 feet above the rooftop, its skids just barely touching down. "Go, go, go!" Marcus shoved his team toward the helicopter while laying down covering fire. They piled in one by one, Damien dragging Vivian with him and throwing her bodily into the passenger compartment. He was the last one aboard, and the moment his feet left the roof, Kozlov pulled up hard. Bullets pinged off the helicopter's armored hull as they climbed. Through the open door, Damien watched Gene-Sys shrink below them, security personnel scattering across the compound like disturbed ants. Then they were over the tree line and banking hard toward the city, leaving chaos in their wake. Inside the helicopter, Vivian was sobbing. Torres was securing the hard drives in a waterproof case. Marcus was on his phone, coordinating cleanup and misdirection. And Damien sat in silence, his mind already moving to the next phase. They had Vivian. They had evidence. They had names. Now they just had to make sure none of it could be buried. The helicopter set down in an industrial area south of the city, landing in a warehouse that had been quietly acquired by one of Damien's shell companies years ago. The moment the skids touched concrete, Damien's team moved with practiced efficiency, securing Vivian in a windowless office at the back of the building, establishing a perimeter, and beginning the process of making the facility disappear from any digital surveillance that might have tracked their flight path. Vivian sat in a metal chair, her expensive clothes rumpled and stained, her face streaked with tears and mascara. She looked nothing like the composed scientist who'd been destroying evidence in her office an hour ago. Now she looked like what she was, a criminal who'd just realized how completely her world had collapsed. Damien stood in front of her, his tactical vest removed but his weapon still holstered at his side. Marcus worked at a laptop nearby, downloading the contents of the hard drives Torres had seized. The data was extensive. Years of research, trial results, financial records, communications between Gene-Sys leadership and their consortium of backers. "How many?" Damien asked quietly. Vivian looked up, her eyes red and swollen. "What? How many children did you experiment on? The real number, not whatever sanitized version is in your official records." She was silent for a long moment. Then, barely audible, 43. The number hit Damien like a physical blow. 43 children. Over 3 years. Not all of them were. Some of them recovered. Some of them are fine now, living normal lives, their parents never knowing what we did. Vivian's voice was hollow. We were careful. We calculated the doses precisely. Most of them survived. Most, Damien repeated. How many didn't? 9. Vivian pressed her hands to her face. 9 children died, but their deaths weren't in vain. The data we collected from their cases advanced our research by years. We learned how to refine the compounds, how to minimize adverse reactions. The children who came after them had better survival rates because you murdered 9 kids and used their corpses as learning opportunities, Damien finished. His control was fraying at the edges, rage building beneath the surface. You really think that justifies it? That scientific progress somehow balances the scales? You don't understand the potential of what we were doing. Vivian's composure shattered completely. The therapies we were developing could have eliminated childhood cancers, genetic disorders, degenerative diseases. We could have saved millions of lives. But people like you, with your small-minded morality, you can't see past the individual tragedies to the greater good. Damien's hand shot out and gripped her throat, not hard enough to strangle, but enough to cut off her words. He leaned in close, his voice deadly quiet. My 6-year-old son is one of your individual tragedies. So spare me the philosophical justification for child murder. He released her and stepped back, his hands shaking with the effort of restraint. Marcus glanced up from the laptop, his expression carefully neutral, ready to intervene if Damien crossed the line from interrogation into execution. Vivian gasped for breath, her hand at her throat. What are you going to do with me? That depends on how cooperative you are. Damien pulled up a chair and sat down, forcing himself back into control. I need more than names and confessions. I need proof that will hold up when this goes public. Bank records, communications, video evidence of the trials, everything that connects Project Genesis to the people funding it. If I give you that, they'll kill me, Vivian said. These aren't just pharmaceutical executives and investors. There are people involved with connections to government agencies, military research programs, corporations worth billions. They have the resources to make anyone disappear. So do I, Damien said. The difference is I'm offering you a choice. Cooperate fully, and I'll make sure you're protected long enough to testify. Refuse, and I'll turn you over to the families of the children you murdered, and let them decide your fate. Vivian's face went white. That's not protection, that's witness intimidation. Call it whatever you want, but you're running out of options. Damien nodded to Marcus. Show her what we found. Marcus turned the laptop around. On the screen were financial records showing massive transfers of money from a network of offshore accounts into Genesis's research division. Hundreds of millions of dollars, all carefully laundered through legitimate medical research grants and charitable foundations. But the trail was there, if you knew where to look and had the resources to dig deep enough. We've already cracked most of your encryption, Marcus said. Within a few hours, we'll have a complete picture of everyone involved in Project Genesis. Names, account numbers, communications, everything. You can help us understand what we're looking at and maybe earn yourself some consideration. Or you can stay silent and be completely disposable when we don't need you anymore. Vivian stared at the screen, her scientific mind clearly racing through probabilities and outcomes. Finally, she spoke. There's a secure server, not connected to the Genesis network. It's maintained by Dr. Richard Ashford personally. He doesn't trust anyone else with the most sensitive data. Everything you need to prove the full scope of Project Genesis is on that server. Where? Damien asked. Ashford's estate, North Shore, private compound with heavy security. The server is in his personal study, air-gapped from the internet. You'd need physical access to extract the data. Marcus was already pulling up property records. Richard Ashford, CEO of Genesys Biomedical, estate in Kenilworth, 15-acre property, private security firm on contract. This is going to be a hard target, boss. We've hit hard targets before. Damien turned back to Vivian. What's the security setup? Armed guards, cameras, biometric locks on the main house. Ashford is paranoid. He's made enemies over the years. People who lost children in the trials and suspected something was wrong. People who tried to investigate and were paid off or silenced. Vivian's voice dropped. He keeps evidence on all of them, too. Insurance, he calls it. Proof of who he's bribed, who he's threatened, who he's had killed. If you get into that server, you'll find enough to bring down half the medical research establishment in this country. Damien exchanged a look with Marcus. This was bigger than they'd anticipated. What had started as revenge for Noah had evolved into something that could expose systemic corruption at the highest levels of pharmaceutical research and medical ethics. How do we access the server? Damien asked. You need Ashford's biometrics, fingerprint and retinal scan. The system won't accept anything else. And even if you bypass that, the data is encrypted with a physical key that he keeps on his person at all times. Vivian met Damien's eyes. You'd need to take him alive and force him to cooperate, which means you'd need to get past his security, into his house, and subdue him without triggering the panic systems that would wipe the server remotely. So we need a plan that's surgical, fast, and completely quiet, Marcus said. That's asking a lot. Then it's a good thing we're very good at asking a lot of ourselves, Damien replied. He stood and pulled out his phone, stepping away to make a call. It was answered on the third ring. How's Noah? He asked without preamble. Elena's voice came through, exhausted but steady. Stable. Cora says his kidney function improved another 15% in the last 2 hours. She's cautiously optimistic he might be strong enough to come off full dialysis support by tomorrow. Damien closed his eyes briefly, letting relief wash through him. That's good, That's really good. Where are you? You said you'd be back soon. That was hours ago. I got delayed, but I'm making progress. Damien looked back at Vivian through the office window. I found the person responsible for Noah's poisoning, and I'm close to finding everyone else involved. There was a long pause. Then Elena said, "What are you going to do to them?" "What they deserve." "Damien, I'll be back as soon as I can. Kiss Noah for me." He ended the call before Elena could argue further and returned to the office. Vivian was talking quietly with Marcus, walking him through the details of Ashford's security setup. She'd apparently decided that cooperation was her best chance at survival. Damien listened as she described patrol patterns, shift changes, blind spots in the camera coverage. "There's a service entrance on the east side," Vivian explained. "It's used by housekeeping and maintenance staff, less monitored than the main gates. If you could get credentials that match their vendor list, you might be able to get onto the property without raising immediate alarms." "And once we're inside?" Marcus asked. "Ashford's study is on the second floor, west wing. He spends most evenings there going over research data and financial reports. If you hit the house between 8 and 10 p.m., he'll likely be alone in that room. His wife travels frequently. She's rarely home. And he doesn't like guards inside the main house during his private hours. He says it makes him feel like a prisoner in his own home." "Arrogant," Damien observed. "Extremely. He believes he's untouchable." Vivian's expression turned bitter. He spent years building that belief, and so far he's been right. Every investigation into GeneSys has been quietly buried. Every whistleblower has been discredited or disappeared. Ashford thinks he's a god playing with human evolution. He won't see you coming until it's too late. Good. Damien checked his watch. It was just past noon. "Marcus, I need a full tactical plan by 1600 hours. Insertion team of 6, full equipment, contingencies for every scenario. We move tonight." Marcus nodded and began making calls, pulling in additional personnel and coordinating logistics. Damien turned back to Vivian. "You're coming with us," he said. Her eyes widened. "What? No, I told you everything, and now you're going to help us execute the plan. If anything you've told us is wrong, if there's a security measure you forgot to mention, you'll be right there to experience the consequences." Damien's tone allowed no argument. "Consider it incentive to be thorough and honest." Vivian slumped in her chair, defeated. "Fine, but if I die doing this, then you die having helped stop something evil," Damien finished, "which is more than you deserve considering what you've done." The afternoon passed in a blur of preparation. Marcus assembled a team of Damien's most trusted operatives, men and women who'd worked together for years, who knew each other's movements instinctively, who could execute complex operations with minimal communication. They studied blueprints of Ashford's estate, memorized guard rotations, identified entry and exit points. Torres worked on creating false credentials that would pass scrutiny at the service entrance. Sarah Chen remotely accessed traffic cameras and satellite surveillance to map approach routes that would minimize exposure. Every detail was planned, every contingency accounted for. At 4 p.m., Damien returned to the Cross Medical Facility to check on Noah. He found Elena in the treatment room, reading to their son from a children's book while machines beeped steadily in the background. Noah was still unconscious, but his color had improved. He looked less like a dying child and more like a sleeping one. Elena looked up when Damien entered. "You look like you're going to war." "Just finishing what I started." Damien moved to the bedside and placed his hand gently on Noah's arm. The boy didn't stir, but Damien felt the warmth of his skin, the steady pulse of blood beneath the surface. Life, fighting to continue. "How is he really?" "Cora says if he maintains this trajectory, he could wake up within 48 hours. His brain activity is normalizing. His organs are recovering. Elena's voice caught. "It's a miracle." "It's good medicine and good timing," Damien corrected gently, "and a stubborn kid who refuses to give up." Elena set the book aside and stood. "What aren't you telling me? What makes you think you have that look? The one you used to get when you were about to do something dangerous and didn't want me to worry." She crossed her arms. "So what is it this time? Where are you going tonight?" Damien met her eyes. "I'm going to finish this. I found the people who authorized Noah's poisoning, and I'm going to make sure they can never hurt another child. By killing them. By exposing them. By collecting evidence that will destroy their careers, their freedom, and their ability to hide behind money and influence. Damien paused. And if some of them don't survive the collection process, I won't lose sleep over it. Elena looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, quietly, I should be trying to talk you out of this. I should be telling you that violence isn't the answer, that we should go to the authorities, that there's a right way to do this. But our son almost died because these people thought they could use him as a lab rat. And part of me, the part that's been sitting in this room watching him fight for every breath, that part wants you to make them pay. Elena's voice hardened. So do what you need to do, just come back alive, because Noah's going to need his father when he wakes up. Damien pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. I'll come back, I promise. Don't make promises you can't keep. I've never broken a promise to you. You promised you'd always protect me, Elena said against his chest. And then you left. I was protecting you. I just did it badly. Damien pulled back to look at her. I won't make that mistake again. He kissed her forehead and left before she could respond, knowing that if he stayed any longer, he might lose his nerve for what came next. At 8 p.m., the team assembled at a staging point 2 miles from Ashford's estate. They wore dark tactical gear and carried equipment designed for stealth and precision. Vivian sat in the back of one of the vans, pale and terrified but resigned to her role. Damien stood before his team and laid out the plan one final time. We go in through the service entrance posing as emergency HVAC repair. Torres has credentials that will check out if anyone runs them. Once we're on the property, we split. Marcus takes 3 to secure the perimeter and disable external communications. I take 2 plus Dr. Cross into the main house. We locate Ashford, secure him, and extract the server data. Total time on site, 15 minutes maximum. Questions? No one spoke. Good. Let's move. The approach to Ashford's estate was executed with military precision. The van with false HVAC company markings rolled up to the service entrance, and Torres presented credentials to the guard on duty. The guard checked them against his tablet, made a call to verify the appointment that Torres had inserted into the system hours ago, and waved them through. They were inside. The estate sprawled before them, all manicured lawns and old money architecture. The main house was a 3-story Georgian mansion that probably cost more than most people earned in several lifetimes. Lights blazed from several windows, but the grounds were quiet, peaceful, completely unaware of what was about to happen. Marcus and his team peeled off toward the security building, moving like shadows through the landscaping. Damien led his smaller group toward the main house, Vivian walking between 2 operatives with weapons discreetly trained on her back in case she decided cooperation wasn't worth it anymore. They reached a service door that Vivian had indicated would be less monitored. Torres made quick work of the electronic lock, and they slipped inside. The interior of Ashford's home was exactly as pretentious as expected. Marble floors, expensive artwork, the kind of furnishings that screamed wealth acquired through exploitation. They moved through the ground floor in silence, clearing rooms and avoiding the few household staff who were finishing evening duties. The stairs to the second floor were carpeted, muffling their footsteps. Vivian led them through a maze of hallways to a heavy wooden door at the end of the west wing. Light showed beneath it. Damien tested the handle. Unlocked. He pushed the door open and stepped inside. Richard Ashford sat at an enormous desk, his back to the door, absorbed in whatever he was reading on his computer screen. He was older than his corporate headshot suggested. Gray hair, expensive suit, the confident posture of a man who'd never faced real consequences for his actions. Dr. Ashford, Damien said quietly. Ashford spun in his chair, shock registering on his face. Then his eyes moved past Damien to Vivian, and shock turned to rage. What the hell is this? Vivian, what have you done? I'm trying to stay alive, Vivian said flatly. Unlike the children we murdered. Ashford's hand moved toward a drawer in his desk. Damien's weapon was out and aimed before Ashford's fingers touched the handle. Don't, Damien advised. Hands on the desk where I can see them. Ashford slowly complied, his mind clearly racing. You're making a mistake. Do you have any idea who I am? The resources I have access to? You can't just break into my home and what? Hold you accountable for experimenting on children? Demand access to the evidence you've been hiding?
Damien moved closer. Actually, I can. And I am. I don't know what lies Vivian has told you, but I can assure you us. Save it. Damien nodded to Torres, who moved to Ashford's computer and began working. We know about Project Genesis. We know about the 43 children you used as test subjects. We know about the 9 who died. And we know you've kept records of everything, insurance against the day someone might come looking for answers. Ashford's face went pale. You can't prove any of that. Your colleague here has been very helpful in explaining exactly where you keep the proof. Damien gestured to Vivian. So here's how this works. You're going to provide the biometric access to your secure server. You're going to give us the encryption key, and you're going to do it quickly and cooperatively, or things are going to get very unpleasant. I'll do no such thing. I have rights. I have lawyers. Damien's weapon shifted slightly, the suppressor now aimed at Ashford's knee. You have 3 seconds to start cooperating. 3, 2... Wait. Ashford held up his hands. Fine, I'll give you access. Just don't shoot. Smart choice. Damien lowered the weapon slightly. Torres, get him to the server. Ashford stood on shaking legs and moved to a painting on the wall, a pastoral landscape worth probably 6 figures. He swung it aside to reveal a biometric scanner, fingerprint, retinal scan, and a keypad requiring a code. He went through the authentication process with trembling hands. The panel slid open, revealing a compact but sophisticated server setup. Torres immediately began connecting equipment to extract the data. This is going to take a few minutes, he said. Encryption's heavy. We don't have a few minutes, Damien replied. His earpiece crackled with Marcus's voice. Boss, we've got a problem. Private security just doubled their patrol. Someone must have gotten suspicious about the HVAC story. We've got maybe 5 minutes before they start checking the main house. Damien swore under his breath. Torres, how long? 3 minutes minimum. Can't rush encryption breaking without corrupting the data. Then we buy 3 minutes. Damien turned to Ashford. Your panic room, where is it? Ashford's eyes widened. How did you... Every paranoid billionaire has one. Where? Behind the bookshelf, southeast corner. Ashford pointed with a shaking hand. Damien moved to the indicated shelf and found the hidden trigger. A section of the wall swung inward, revealing a reinforced safe room with steel walls and a heavy door. Get inside, he ordered Ashford and Vivian. What? Why? Vivian protested. Because in about 2 minutes this place is going to be swarming with armed security, and I need you both somewhere they won't look. Damien shoved them both into the panic room. Torres, how close? Almost there. 90 seconds. The sound of footsteps in the hallway outside made the decision for them. Damien positioned himself behind the door as it swung open, and 2 security guards entered, weapons drawn. What followed was brutal and efficient. Damien disabled the first guard with a strike to the throat, then used the man's body as a shield against the second guard's gunfire. His own weapon came up and he put 2 suppressed rounds into the second guard's center mass. Both men went down hard. But the noise had been enough. Shouts echoed through the house, more footsteps pounding up the stairs. Torres! Got it! Torres yanked the connection free, the portable hard drive blinking to confirm successful data transfer. We're good to go. East window, emergency descent, Damien ordered. They'd positioned climbing equipment there hours ago, anticipating the need for a quick exit. Torres went first, rappelling down the exterior wall with practiced speed. Damien grabbed the hard drive and followed, leaving Ashford and Vivian locked in the panic room. They hit the ground and ran for the perimeter fence just as alarms began shrieking across the estate. Marcus's voice crackled in Damien's ear. Extraction point Alpha, 30 seconds. They made it to the fence and went over using the same technique, dropping into the cover of trees just as searchlights began sweeping the grounds. A dark SUV roared up the access road, doors already open. Damien and Torres threw themselves inside, and the vehicle accelerated away before the doors were even closed. Behind them, Ashford's estate erupted in chaos. Lights, sirens, security personnel scrambling to understand what had just happened. But by the time they organized a coherent response, Damien's team was already miles away, melting back into the city's sprawl. In the SUV, Damien examined the hard drive Torres had secured. Did we get everything? Everything and then some, Torres confirmed. Financial records, trial data, communications between Ashford and his backers,
video evidence of the experiments. This is going to bury them all. Damien allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. They'd done it. Against heavy odds and significant danger, they'd secured the evidence needed to expose Project Genesis and everyone involved. Now came the hard part, deciding what to do with it. The warehouse was quiet except for the hum of computer equipment as Torres worked through the night, cataloging the contents of Ashford's server. What they'd extracted was more devastating than even Damien had anticipated. Not just evidence of Project Genesis, but a sprawling web of corruption that touched dozens of pharmaceutical companies, research institutions, and government agencies. Damien stood at the window watching dawn break over Chicago, his phone pressed to his ear as Sarah Chen walked him through the implications. "It's massive," Sarah said, her voice crackling with exhaustion and excitement. Ashford kept everything: communications with FDA officials who buried safety reports, payments to hospital administrators who falsified patient records, video recordings of meetings where they discussed which children to target based on genetic profiles. And the trial data, boss, this goes back almost 5 years. Project Genesis wasn't their first program. It was just the most ambitious. "How many children total?" Damien asked, though part of him didn't want to know the answer. "At least 73 that we can confirm. Probably more that weren't properly documented." Sarah paused. "There are files here about international operations too. They were recruiting candidates from orphanages in Eastern Europe, refugee camps in the Middle East, places where children disappear and no one asks questions." Damien closed his eyes. The scope of it was staggering. What had started as revenge for Noah had uncovered something that dwarfed any single crime. It was systematic exploitation of the most vulnerable, conducted with scientific precision and protected by institutional power. "What's your recommendation?" he asked Sarah. "Boom. We can't sit on this. Even if you wanted to, the people involved will know we have it. Ashford's probably already making calls, warning his partners. They'll be mobilizing resources to discredit us, destroy evidence, maybe come after us directly." Sarah's voice hardened. "We need to go public before they can organize a response. And we need to do it in a way they can't bury." "Agreed. Start packaging the evidence. I want multiple copies distributed to different outlets simultaneously. Investigative journalists, federal prosecutors, watchdog organizations. Make it impossible to contain." "Already on it. I've reached out to contacts at the Tribune, the Times, and ProPublica. They're standing by for secure data transfers." Sarah hesitated. "Damien, once we release this, there's no taking it back. You'll be exposing your own involvement in the extraction. People will ask questions about how you obtained this information." "Let them ask. I'm not hiding from this." Damien turned from the window. "How long until you can coordinate simultaneous release?" 12 hours, maybe less if everyone moves quickly." "Make it happen." Damien ended the call and found Marcus waiting nearby, tablet in hand. "Vivian's been talking," Marcus said. "She's given us names of everyone in the consortium backing Project Genesis. Politicians, pharmaceutical executives, venture capitalists. Some of them are going to have serious protection, the kind that makes problems disappear." "Then we'll need to be smarter than their protection," Damien replied. "What about Ashford?" "Still locked in his panic room as far as we know. His security eventually breached it, but by then half the estate was contaminated as a crime scene. Local police are involved now, asking questions about the break-in. Ashford's claiming it was a robbery, but he can't explain what was stolen without admitting the server existed." "Good, let him squirm." Damien checked his watch. It was just past 6 a.m. "I'm going back to check on Noah. Keep me updated on the media coordination." The Cross Medical Facility was quiet in the early morning, most of its overnight staff finishing their shifts. Damien found Elena curled in a chair beside Noah's bed, sleeping fitfully. But what made him stop in the doorway was Noah himself. The boy's eyes were open. Damien's breath caught. He moved into the room carefully, not wanting to startle the child. Noah's gaze tracked the movement, his expression confused and frightened. When he saw Damien, he shrank back against the pillows. "It's okay," Damien said softly. "You're safe. You're in a hospital and you're going to be fine." Noah's mouth moved, but no sound came out. His throat was probably raw from the intubation. Elena stirred at the sound of Damien's voice and sat up, disoriented. Then she saw Noah awake and burst into tears. "Oh, thank God! Thank God!" She was at his bedside in an instant, taking his small hand in both of hers. "Noah, baby, can you hear me? Do you know who I am?" Noah's eyes focused on her, and some of the fear left his face. He nodded slightly. "You've been very sick, sweetheart, but you're getting better now. The doctors took good care of you."
Elena was crying and smiling at the same time, her relief so profound it filled the room. "You're going to be okay." Damien stood back, giving them space, his own emotions churning. This was his son, 6 years old, brave and fragile, fighting his way back from the edge of death. And Damien had missed 6 years of his life. First words, first steps, every milestone and moment that made up a childhood. He told himself it was necessary, that staying away kept them safe. But looking at Noah now, Damien understood the magnitude of what he'd lost, and what he'd almost lost permanently. Cora appeared in the doorway, summoned by the alert from Noah's monitors, indicating he'd regained consciousness. She moved past Damien with professional efficiency, checking Noah's vitals and responses. "Excellent," she murmured, shining a light in Noah's eyes and watching his pupils respond. "Neurological function appears intact. Can you squeeze my hand, Noah?" Noah complied weakly. "Good. And can you wiggle your toes?" Another weak movement under the blankets. "Very good." Cora stepped back and addressed Elena. "His cognitive and motor responses are normal for someone recovering from severe toxin exposure. We'll need to monitor him closely for the next 48 hours, but this is extremely encouraging." Elena couldn't stop touching Noah, his face, his hair, his hands, as if reassuring herself he was real and present. "When can he come home?" "Let's get him through the next 2 days first," Cora said gently. "But if he continues improving at this rate, possibly by the end of the week." Noah's gaze had drifted to Damien again, studying this stranger with a child's unfiltered curiosity. Elena followed his look and seemed to make a decision. "Noah, there's someone I want you to meet." She gestured for Damien to come closer. "This is Damien. He's your father." The words hung in the air. Noah's eyes widened, processing this information with whatever limited understanding a 6-year-old could muster. Damien knelt beside the bed so he was at eye level with his son. "Hi, Noah," he said quietly. "I'm sorry we're meeting like this. I'm sorry I haven't been around, but I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere." Noah studied him for a long moment. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, rough and uncertain, "You look like me." Damien felt something crack in his chest. Yeah, I guess I do." "Are you nice?" The question was so innocent, so direct, that Damien almost couldn't answer. Was he nice? He'd built an empire on violence and intimidation. He'd hurt people, killed people, done things that would haunt him forever. But looking at this child, his child, he knew what answer he wanted to be true. "I'm trying to be," he said, "for you." Noah seemed to accept this. His eyes were already drooping, exhaustion pulling him back toward sleep. Elena smoothed his hair and whispered that it was okay to rest, that she'd be right here when he woke up. Within minutes, Noah was asleep again, his breathing steady and peaceful. Elena turned to Damien, her face streaked with tears. "Thank you," she said, "for whatever you did to find the people who hurt him, for bringing him back to me." "To us," Damien corrected. "He's ours, Elena. Both of ours." And I meant what I said. I'm not going anywhere. Elena studied his face. "What happens now? With the people responsible?" "Justice happens. Real justice, not the kind that gets buried by expensive lawyers." Damien pulled out his phone and showed her a draft press release Sarah had prepared. "In a few hours, every major news outlet in the country is going to receive evidence of what GeneSys has been doing. Names, dates, financial records, everything. It's going to be impossible to ignore." Elena read through the document, her expression hardening as she absorbed the details. "This will destroy them." "That's the idea." "And you? What happens to you when people start asking how you obtained this evidence?" "I'll deal with it." Damien pocketed the phone. "But Noah's safe now. That's what matters." Before Elena could respond, Damien's phone buzzed with an urgent message from Marcus. "We have a situation. Ashford's people are moving. They're trying to get ahead of the story." Damien stepped into the hallway and called Marcus back. "What's happening?" "Ashford just held an emergency press conference.
He's claiming his home was invaded by criminals who stole proprietary research data, and he's demanding federal investigation into the theft. He's trying to frame this as corporate espionage before we can release the real story. How much time do we have? Hours, maybe less. If he convinces the FBI to seize our evidence as stolen property, we could lose control of the narrative entirely. Damien's mind raced through options. Then we don't wait. Release everything now. Every outlet, every contact, simultaneous distribution. Make it too big to contain. That's going to be messy. We haven't had time to redact sensitive information, coordinate with prosecutors. I don't care about mess. I care about making sure this gets out before they can stop it. Damien's voice was ice. Send it all. Now. There was a pause. Then Marcus said, "You're sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." "All right. Initiating distribution now." Damien could hear keyboard clicking in the background as Marcus executed the command that would unleash everything they'd gathered. Within minutes, gigabytes of data were flowing to journalists, prosecutors, watchdog organizations, and congressional oversight committees. The evidence of Project Genesis, with all its horror and implications, was being scattered across the digital landscape like seeds in the wind. There was no taking it back now. Damien returned to Noah's room to find Elena at the window, staring out at the city. She turned when he entered. "It's done, isn't it?" she said. "Whatever you've been planning." "Yes, the evidence is going public. By noon, everyone will know what Genesis has been doing." Elena wrapped her arms around herself. "And then?" "Then the system takes over. Federal investigations, criminal charges, civil lawsuits. The people responsible will spend the rest of their lives in prison or fighting to stay out of it." "You don't sound satisfied." "Because prison is too clean for what they deserve," Damien said bluntly. "But it's what's best for Noah. He doesn't need a father who's a killer. He needs a father who's there." Elena turned to face him fully. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I'm choosing differently this time. 6 years ago, I walked away because I thought it would protect you. I was wrong. So this time, I'm staying. Whatever consequences come from what I've done, whatever legal trouble or professional fallout, I'll face it. But I'm not disappearing again." Tears welled in Elena's eyes. "You mean that?" "Every word." She crossed the room and wrapped her arms around him, and for the first time in 6 years, Damien felt like he might actually deserve the embrace. The next hours were chaos. News outlets began publishing stories based on the leaked data, each revelation more damning than the last. Video footage of Genesis executives discussing which children to target. Financial records showing millions in bribes to regulators. Testimony from parents whose children had died under suspicious circumstances, their grief weaponized into cooperation and silence. By afternoon, the FBI had announced a formal investigation into Genesis and its partners. The Securities and Exchange Commission had frozen the company's assets. 3 members of Congress had called for emergency hearings. And Ashford's panic room couldn't protect him anymore. Federal agents arrived at his estate with warrants for his arrest. Damien watched it unfold from the medical facility, his team feeding him updates in real time. Vivian had turned herself in to prosecutors, offering full cooperation in exchange for protection and reduced charges. Other members of the Project Genesis consortium were scrambling to cut deals, each one implicating the others in a cascade of confessions and counter-accusations. The House of Cards was collapsing, but there was still one loose end. Marcus appeared at the facility that evening with news. "The FBI wants to talk to you. They know you were involved in obtaining the evidence, and they want to know how." "Let them want," Damien said. "I'll cooperate when I'm ready. Right now, my priority is my son." "They might not give you that choice. There's talk of subpoenas, maybe even charges for breaking and entering, assault on Ashford's security guards. Then I'll deal with it when it comes." Damien's tone was final. "Anything else?" Marcus hesitated, then handed over a tablet. "This came through on a secure channel an hour ago. It's from someone claiming to be a Project Genesis survivor." Damien read the message. It was from a woman named Claire Morrison, 24 years old, who'd been part of Genesis's earliest trials when she was 12. The experiments had left her with permanent health complications, but she'd survived. And now she wanted to help make sure no other child suffered what she had. "She's willing to testify," Marcus explained. "She says there are others like her, survivors scattered across the country who've been too afraid to come forward. But now that the story's breaking, They want justice. Damien felt something shift in his chest. This was bigger than Noah, bigger than revenge. This was about every child who'd been used and discarded by people who saw them as raw material for profit and prestige. "Put me in touch with her," he said, "and find the others. I want to know their stories, their names. I want prosecutors to hear directly from the people Gene Sis hurt." Marcus nodded and left to make it happen. Elena appeared in the doorway, having overheard the conversation. "You're really doing this," she said. "Not just for Noah, but for all of them." "Someone has to." Damien looked at Noah, still sleeping peacefully. "These children deserve someone who will fight for them. If it has to be me, then it has to be me." Elena moved closer and took his hand. "Then we'll do it together. I'm a public defender, remember? Fighting for people who can't fight for themselves is literally my job." Damien squeezed her hand. "I was hoping you'd say that." Over the next 3 days, the story consumed national attention. Congressional hearings were scheduled. Criminal indictments were unsealed against 17 individuals connected to Project Genesis. Gene Sis's stock price collapsed, and the company filed for bankruptcy protection. And one by one, survivors came forward with their testimonies, each one adding weight to the mountain of evidence. Noah continued to improve, his strength returning gradually but steadily. Cora cleared him to leave intensive care, moving him to a regular room where he could sit up, eat solid food, and begin the long process of recovery. Elena barely left his side, reading to him, playing quiet games, helping him process what had happened in terms a 6-year-old could understand. Damien visited every day, each visit a little less awkward than the last. Noah was tentative around him at first, this stranger who claimed to be his father. But children were resilient, and with Elena's gentle encouragement, Noah began to warm to Damien's presence. They talked about small things, favorite foods, favorite colors, what Noah wanted to be when he grew up. "A scientist," Noah announced one afternoon, completely serious, "so I can make medicine that helps people instead of hurts them." Damien felt his throat tighten. Even after everything that had been done to him, this child wanted to heal, wanted to make things better. It was a kind of grace Damien didn't fully understand but recognized as precious. "That's a good goal," he said. "Your mom and I will help you get there." On the 5th day after Noah woke up, Cora declared him healthy enough to go home. Elena had been staying at Damien's secure facility for safety, but now she wanted to return to their apartment, to normalcy, to routine, to the life she'd built for herself and Noah, except the apartment was still contaminated from the poisoning. "Stay with me," Damien said. "I have a place, not the penthouse office, somewhere else. A house outside the city, quiet, secure, with enough room for all of us. Stay there while your apartment gets properly cleaned and certified safe." Elena hesitated. "Damien, please, just until we're sure it's safe. After that, if you want to leave, I won't stop you. But right now, let me make sure you're both protected." She looked at Noah, who was watching their conversation with bright, curious eyes. Then she looked back at Damien and nodded. "Okay, but this doesn't mean we're not just picking up where we left off 6 years ago. Things are different now." "I know. I'm different. You're different. We'll figure out what this is as we go." Damien managed a small smile. "No promises except that I'm here. That enough?" "For now," Elena said. "It's enough for now." The house was in Evanston, a restored Victorian with a fenced yard and enough space that Noah could run and play without feeling confined. Damien had owned it for years but rarely used it, just another asset in his portfolio of properties scattered across the city. But now it became something more. It became home. Elena set up Noah's room with his favorite things, creating a space that felt safe and familiar. Damien installed additional security quietly, without making it obvious or frightening. And slowly, carefully, they began to build something that resembled a family. The legal fallout continued. Federal prosecutors reached out to Damien through his attorneys, offering immunity from prosecution in exchange for his full cooperation and testimony about how he'd obtained the evidence. It was a deal designed to ensure the cases against Gene Sis and its conspirators would be airtight, and Damien accepted it without hesitation. He testified in closed sessions before a grand jury, walking them through everything he'd discovered and how. His testimony was damning and detailed, and it resulted in additional indictments against people who'd thought themselves safely insulated from consequences. Ashford tried to fight the charges, claiming the evidence was inadmissible because it had been stolen. But the sheer volume of corroborating testimony from survivors, whistleblowers, and Vivian's cooperation made his defense untenable. Prosecutors offered him a plea deal: life in prison in exchange for full disclosure about Project Genesis and everyone involved. He took it, because the alternative was a trial that would expose even more of his crimes, and potentially a death penalty case in jurisdictions where the murdered children had lived. 6 months after Noah's poisoning, the last major indictment was filed. 23 individuals charged with conspiracy, murder, fraud, and violations of federal research ethics. The trial dates were set for the following year, and prosecutors were confident they'd secure convictions. It was over. Not perfectly. Some people involved would never face justice, having fled the country or hidden behind legal protections. But the system that had enabled Project Genesis was dismantled. GeneSys was defunct, its assets seized and liquidated to create a compensation fund for victims. And new federal regulations were being drafted to prevent similar abuses in the future. Elena returned to work at the public defender's office, but she also took on a new role as an advocate for the Project Genesis survivors. She helped them navigate the legal system, connected them with support services, and ensured their voices were heard in the ongoing prosecutions. Damien gradually stepped back from the daily operations of his criminal enterprise, delegating more to trusted lieutenants while focusing on legitimate business ventures. It wasn't a clean break. Men like him didn't just walk away from that life. But it was a transition, a slow pivot towards something that Noah could one day understand and maybe even respect. And Noah himself thrived. The toxin had left no permanent damage, according to Cora's thorough examinations. He went back to school, made friends, played soccer, and slowly forgot the terror of those days in the hospital. He knew his father was someone important, someone powerful, but Damien worked hard to make sure Noah also knew him as someone who showed up to school events, helped with homework, and read bedtime stories. One evening, nearly a year after everything had happened, Damien sat on Noah's bed reading from a children's book about dragons and brave knights. Noah was drowsy, fighting sleep with the determination only a 7-year-old could muster. "Dad?" Noah said suddenly. Damien still wasn't used to that word. It made his chest tight every time. "Yeah, buddy? Are you a good guy or a bad guy?" The question was innocent, but it cut deep. Damien set the book down and thought about how to answer honestly without destroying his son's faith in him. "I've done bad things," he said finally. "Things I'm not proud of. But I'm trying to do better. Trying to be the kind of person you can be proud of when you're older." Noah considered this seriously. "Mom says you saved me. That makes you a good guy. Your mom's generous. She also says you saved a lot of other kids, too. The ones on TV who were sick like me." Noah's eyes were starting to close. "That's definitely good guy stuff." Damien smoothed Noah's hair back from his forehead. "Maybe I'm both. A bad guy trying to be good. Would that be okay?" "Yeah," Noah mumbled, already half asleep. "Just keep trying." "I will, I promise." Noah drifted off, and Damien sat there for a long time, watching his son sleep. In the doorway, Elena appeared, leaning against the frame with a soft smile. "You're getting good at that," she said quietly. "At what?" "Being his father." Damien stood and followed her out of the room, leaving the door cracked so they could hear if Noah needed them. They walked downstairs to the kitchen, where Elena poured 2 glasses of wine and handed one to Damien. "I've been thinking," she said. "About us? About what this is." Damien's chest tightened. "And?" "And I think—" Elena paused, choosing her words carefully. "I think we're not the people we were 6 years ago. We can't just pick up where we left off. But maybe we can build something new, something that fits who we are now." "What does that look like?" "I don't know yet. But I know I don't want to do this alone anymore. Raising Noah, dealing with all the aftermath of what happened, it's better with you here. So maybe we start there. Partners in parenting, figuring out the rest as we go." Damien set down his wine and took her hands. "I can work with that." Elena smiled, and it was genuine and warm and full of possibility. "Good, because Noah's going to need both of us to survive his teenage years." Terrifying thought. "Tell me about it." They stood there in the quiet kitchen, the house settling around them, and for the first time in years, Damien felt something he'd almost forgotten. Peace. Not perfect, not complete, but real and earned and worth protecting. Outside, Chicago hummed with its usual chaos, crime and corruption, power and politics, all the machinery of a city that never stopped moving. But in this house, in this moment, there was just a family finding its way forward. Noah was safe. The people who'd hurt him were facing justice. And Damian Cross, the man who'd built an empire on fear and violence, had found something more valuable than power. He'd found a reason to be better. And in the end, that was the only redemption that mattered.